The reason that I asked you to watch that video is really twofold. First, I think it does a pretty good job of explaining 1080-10. Second, the video is aimed at the general public, which means that not only educators, but probably much more so for the business world. Now, a caution that I always give people is this: we got to be careful how much we say, this is what the business world does it, this is what real life does it, and this is how we do it. We're different. We're unique. We're dealing with young people. As simple as that. You know, I have a number of friends here in Dayton that are retired CEOs, and one of the things I enjoy doing with them is talking to them about 1080-10. One of them in particular has very strong feelings on it, and he feels that it's the key to success of any CEO. As a matter of fact, he expands those brackets a little bit and calls it 20, 60, 20. He feels that the most important ingredient to the success of the CEO is how they handle the bottom 20. He starts out by saying this: we brought them in, we have an obligation to them. If they're a problem, they're our problem. And how we deal with that is we give them every tool they need, and we invest every effort that we have in helping that bottom 20 move up at least into the middle 60. Of course, he also expands it and says the same thing. He says every member of that middle 60, we give them every tool that they need to move up into the top 20. Well, let's go back to the bottom 20. He says, regardless of what you do, you still have a very large number of employees in the company that are down in that 20%. He says you have to fire them. He says the reason you have to fire them is, number one, for the success of the company. He said they're dragging you down, they have a negative influence on all the other employees, and they're just not productive. You know, there's a bottom line in business is this: you're hired to make money for the employer. If you're not making money for the employer, they don't need you. Just as simple as that. He also says it's the compassionate thing to do, and he puts out a pretty good argument for it. He says the most important thing for people to do is be happy in life. He says if you're on a job that you've been given everything you need to be successful, and you still can't cut it there, you're going to be a miserable person. Why not cut that person loose? Let them go to employment somewhere where they can be successful at it, and their skills and their talents are more fitted to that, and you're actually doing them a favor. And he believes it with his whole heart, just as simple as that. Now that leads me into college. College is different. You know, I want to give you an example. I have great respect for Coach Urban Meyer, the former coach at Ohio State University, one of the best coaches in the history of college football. Coach Meyer basically has the same beliefs as 1080-10, but he calls it Gold Club, which is gold being premier, Red Club, which signifies the Buckeye, and Blue Club, which signifies Michigan. So gold, red, and blue clubs. 10-80-10, same thing. His philosophy is very simple, much again similar to the CEO friend. Give the bottom 10% everything they need, the blue club, to become red club members. Encourage them, support them. But, here we go, if they can't do it, they need to be cut loose. These are college students. They need to be cut out of the program. Again, his logic makes sort of sense. He says, look, we're preparing these young men for life after college. He says, what kind of preparation are we giving them if we don't prepare them for the real world, where they're going to go into that world that my CEO friend, excuse me, my CEO friend described, where they're going to be fired. You know, a little bit about that philosophy of Coach Myers. I think it's great for college. They're on scholarship. They're one step away from being employed. But you know, I heard Coach Meyer give this a number of times at clinics that are filled with high school coaches. And his logic makes sense, but makes sense for college. And I see high school coaches nod in their head and say, you know what? I'm going to go back and I'm going to cut the bottom 10% of my players, because that's the way Coach Meyer does it. He's head coach of the Buckeyes, and we're all Buckeyes in this state. And so you saw a sense of logic. I don't agree with that. And it worried me that coaches would go back and cut players. Here's one of my philosophies. I believe in never cutting a player. You know, a great friend of mine named Leonard Rush, who was state championship coach and a great person, told me this story. He said, Jim, I cut one player. It was up in Lima, and when a young man was 25, he killed a family of 4. And I thought to myself, you know, what would have happened if I would have drawn my line in the sand one more time, given that young man one more chance, even though he didn't deserve it? Would he have ended up killing that family of 5 and 4, I guess? So it made me think about it. And my philosophy is, I don't believe in cutting players. Now, let me explain something. There have been times where players have left the team. And I'm a great believer in suspensions. So a young man does an action, I'll call him and say, look, you're going to have to run after practice. And here we go with the suspension. You have done something so severe that you're not going to start the game on Friday night. Even though you're a great player, you're going to sit out the whole first possession and not have the honor of starting. Or you're going to sit the first quarter, or if it's really extreme, you're going to sit one game. We're not going to play you Friday night. I've done that a lot of times. I'm going to sit him for 2 games. Sit him for 2 games. There have been times where the same player I've sat for 2 games, and another time in his career I sat for 2 games again. You know what, though? I never had a situation where I actually had to cut a player. Because players in those situations where I've walked all those planks, drawn all those lines in the sand with them, they end up just quitting. In other words, their issues are so great that they just drop off and they don't come around anymore. So, fortunately, I've never had a situation where I've actually cut a player. I just don't believe in it. Because here's why, and now we're going to tie all of this discussion into K-12. If we cut them, where are they going? You know what? They can't go to another job. We can't just turn them loose. We're not making a profit. We're making young people. You know, you're in your classroom. There's situations where the administration can remove a student and put him in some kind of alternative education, still within the school system. But if we're looking at the overall school system, we've got them. You know, and I really thought that as far as being on the football team. You know, I always had a staff of pretty energetic young men, maybe some of whom played for me. If we can't reach a young man, how can we expect to throw them back into a classroom and expect a teacher who doesn't have as much in common with them to reach them? And it's one of the reasons I always thought, I'm not going to cut this player. I'm going to walk him, suspend him, and draw that line in the sand just as many times as I can possibly draw it. But what are we going to do with that bottom 10? You know, very seldom can a teacher go to a principal and say, look, you know what? This student really is not functioning in my class. I want him out. I want him fired. It just doesn't work that way. It's not the way K through 12 works, and it's not the way it should work. So let's talk a little more about the 10-80-10. You know, Urban Meyer says the success of his team is based upon how he motivates that top 10, and then how he motivates the blue club to move up to the red club, and the red club especially to move up into the gold club. He has different stripes on their helmets that when they move from one club to another, they get different stripes, just as simple as that. And I'm all in on motivating that top 10%. Here's a story that relates to 10-80-10 in a K through 12 setting. It involves my football team. We had an outstanding season one year, really, really strong season, and had a very talented group of players coming back the next year, and I really thought we were going to have just as good a season the next year. We went 4-6. Very disappointing, very hard to get together. Could never quite put my finger on why we were not succeeding. I knew something was wrong, but I could never quite put my hands on it and just said, well, sometimes the ball just bounces that way. The end of the season, I'm sitting in my office. I hear a knock on the door, and 3 of my top young men come in. They were definitely Gold Club members for Urban Meyer, top 10%, just the greatest young men that you would ever want to meet. And the first words out of their mouth has affected me to this day. They said, Coach, why did you let them do it? Why did you let them steal our dreams? My response is, what are you talking about? I have no idea what you're talking about. Said, Coach, you had to know. Said there was a group on the team that was smoking pot. They were getting drunk before games, the night before games. They were negative. They didn't buy into anything you said. We were trying to pull that 10-80-10, the 80 in the middle up to us. We understood that, Coach, and we were doing everything we could. Said, but they were stronger. They had a stronger influence. They had very strong personalities. As the season went on, the middle group went more and more and more. Said, Coach, if we would have gone to another game, it would have been embarrassing because they had taken over the almost entire group. Were going to negative. They were going to they had a bonfire before the last game where they all went out and got drunk before the game. And of course, we performed poorly that next night. Said, Coach, why did you let them do it? Well, I had to reflect on it, and I said, guys, obviously what you and I would all say is, I didn't know. I didn't think about it. I don't know. I promise you, and it's breaking my heart that you guys are such good young men. And they went on to explain this. Coach, we had great dreams. We wanted to have a great season just like the year before, and we know next year's going to have a great season. We wanted to go on to a certain level in college football. They all went on to play college football, but not at the level that they probably could have if everything would have been maximized. They were very good players and very good people. And the nice part of the story is they've all gone on to tremendous success in their lives. All three of them outstanding young men, two of them actually leaders here in the Dayton community. But go back to the situation. I thought about it, and the more I reflected upon it, every sign in the world was there. How could I have missed it? I just can't understand how I missed it. It was obvious. So what are the lessons of that story? First of all, the first lesson is we have to be conscious of what's going on in our classroom. Do we sit down and consciously think, what's the attitude of this class? Why has this class got a great attitude? And then for the high school situation, I go to the next period and they got a terrible attitude. Just what's going on there? What's the difference? Well, it's the dynamics of the students in the class. And you've got to pay attention to it and try to figure out a plan, and there I go again with that magic word plan, to motivate the students to move up and be the best version that they can. But just as important, when they said to me, Coach, why did you let them steal our dreams? It made me realize one thing. Set your standards for that top group. In other words, yes, granted, do everything to get the middle group and give them the attention they deserve. To establish tremendous relationships with what's called that bottom group to hopefully bring them in. But here's the bottom line. Set your standards for that top group. Everything you do is say, this is the way we're going to do things. If we say, put your foot on the line, we don't let players put it 6 inches over the line. We don't put them 6 inches behind the line. We put them on the line. When we make rules, we enforce those rules. We call them policies more than rules, to be honest. But I'll explain that later. But just plain and simple. Set your standards for those that have dreams, that want to achieve, that look at you and say, please, challenge me, make me the best. Now, how does that reflect? It reflects on this fact for the classroom teacher, and A is an A. I think we've gone into a situation, I know there's high schools in the area where 50% of the students have a 3.1 or better. Wait a minute. You're talking about grade inflation. I think that you have to maintain the standards of A. Now the students are going to reach A, and that's probably right. These are the people that are chasing their dreams, they're doing things the right way. I really believe that you've got to keep your standards high in order to meet that group, just as simple as that. Now, I'd like you to watch a video by that very dynamic Rita Pierson that talks about relationships and the role of the educator.